Kia ora and welcome to the third episode of our Beyond the Boat podcast series. My name is Tina Manker. I'm a performance life coach at High Performance Sport New Zealand, and together with my colleagues, I work to support our athletes with anything beyond their respective sports. In today's episode, I'm talking to Stephen Jones, who was part of Rowing New Zealand's elite rowing squad for many, many years. Stephen went to St. Peter's College in Auckland, where he started rowing through West End Rowing Club. He has represented New Zealand at juniors, under-23s and elite rowing world championships, and also at the Rio and the Tokyo Olympic Games. At the end of last year, though, Stephen decided to end his rowing career and move into the next exciting part of his life. And today we're talking about how that transition is working out for him and also for his wife, Anna, and their two kids, Oliver and Ruby. Welcome, Stephen. Nice to see you.
Good to be here.
Hi.
Really good. Really good. It's been a good week. Weather's starting to turn a bit average, getting into winter, but I'm not out on the water rowing, so it doesn't actually affect me too much anymore. Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for coming on. I'm wondering, perhaps we just start off by just talking about what are you doing right now, and how is that, I guess, different to what your normal day or week would look like when you were a rower?
Yeah, well, so what I'm doing now is working a nice desk job, doing mortgage broking, helping people getting into houses and things like that. But probably the big difference for me is around the mornings. I don't have to wake up at 5:30, 6 o'clock and do things like that. I mean, I still do because I've got little kids who wake up that early and come jump in bed first thing in the morning. But it's really nice, especially having a family. And in the last few years of my rowing, I had Oliver and then had Ruby as in my last year of rowing. So it's definitely a really nice contrast now, where in my last few years of rowing, kids would wake up in the morning and I'd be leaving. And now it's, they wake up in the morning, come jump in bed in the morning, we read a book or something. So yeah, it's quite a nice transition having those mornings changed around a bit. Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds really nice, bit of family time to take off the day. So in terms of the rest of your daily structure or your weekly structure, I guess, you just talked about how you normally have these really early morning training sessions, and then I guess what happened after that, and how does it look now beyond the mornings?
Wake up, have some breakfast, cruise into work at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock is generally a good starting time for me. That's very much dictated because of my job in mortgage broking, that we're working with the banks, and that's when the banks start in the morning. So no point starting earlier because they're not there for us to talk to. And so it's the typical start, meeting some clients, liaising with some bank people during the day, getting out and about and seeing other people that sort of work in our industry, and that's other mortgage people, insurance, real estate agents, going out for coffees and things with people like that. It's quite nice. Yeah, that's sort of a typical day. And then depending on how busy it is or whatever, it's usually finishing up around that 3, 4, 5 o'clock is quite nice, because it means I can pick the kids up from daycare in the afternoon and go home, go for a walk, do some exercise or something like that, because having come out of sport for so many years, I don't want to get a desk job and sit down and get fat. So that's
fair enough. I was
definitely something on the radar.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What's that been like in terms of the fitness and actually feeling healthy and well, transitioning out of sport that? It sounds like you still make that a priority to have a bit of exercise in your day.
Yeah, it's definitely an important one for me, is staying a little bit fit and staying capable as well. But I mean, the biggest thing I notice is that I'm just not tired all the time anymore. I've actually got the energy to do things, which is really nice, because and that's just on the weekends. Finishing work on a Friday afternoon means that we go away for the weekend to do something, and which is a really nice contrast, and I really appreciate it after so many years of rowing, of sort of training through till mid Saturday afternoon and then being tired for the rest of the day, tired on Sunday, and thinking about how do I like get myself in the best shape to be back at training on Monday. So yeah, I really appreciate the having energy and also having time to do things now. Yeah, which unsure if I would have appreciated it that much if I hadn't done the all the years of rowing that I did. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the contrast really helps with that. Lots of athletes actually talk about that when they move into kind of the next phase, I guess, that they're kind of noticing how much more energy they kind of have. And I think lots of people who aren't athletes or haven't been athletes often, think, well, athletes must just be super fit. But actually, the reality is you are really tired most of the time. Yes, you are fit, but you're really tired from training lots and lots of the time. So that's nice that, that's something that you're really noticing in contrast, I guess. Would you mind telling us a little bit about how you sort of got into your career? Because there's lots of athletes who are kind of trying to develop sort of their next career alongside their sport. And not everybody knows where to go or how to make those decisions. Like, how did this play out for you?
Yeah, really interesting way it did sort of play out, to be honest, because what I had, like a lot of people, absolutely no idea what I was wanting to do or what I was wanting to get into. And what it ended up being is that my mum works in this sort of industry, and also my mother-in-law works in this sort of industry. And from having a chat with them, they were like, "Oh, why don't you just do this like study? Here's what you need to do to get into it." And then it's something that's sort of there anyway. And then what ended up happening is the way the study works is it's online and go through it at your own pace. And it just so happened that the week that there was 2 weeks of like online classes, pretty like full days, and that just happened to line up perfectly with when I was in MIQ coming back from qualification regatta before the Olympics. So what ended up happening in terms of the study side of it was we went over to Lucerne for last chance qualifying regatta. I did my first day of classes the day after racing finished at midnight, sitting in the hotel over in Switzerland. Did the next day of classes sitting in our overnight stay in Singapore airport. And it actually all just worked out perfectly. I think I might have missed like 10 minutes of class once we got to Singapore airport because we were a bit slow getting to our hotel. And then did the next like 2 weeks of classes each day sitting in MIQ. So that was quite worked out quite perfectly actually. And then that was sort of the study side, and I was in that mindset of thinking that maybe this could be a good industry for me, and found it quite interesting, which is always a plus, because after so many years of having like being passionate about rowing and passionate about sport, I was like, am I really going to find something else that I'm actually that interested in? So it was really nice to be able to do the study and get a good idea of what I was looking at. Like, actually, I do find this interesting. It is quite cool. When we got through the Olympics and post Olympics, didn't have the result I was wanting at the Olympics, and I was sort of weighing it up, and I was like, is this the time for me to stop? Is this what I'm looking at? And at that stage, I was like, I still have the motivation to do it. I still want to keep going. But being realistic, we've also got to, like, we had one kid at that stage, and it was like, maybe I need to start looking at working alongside my rowing, because my plan at that stage was I'm going to go through to the Paris Olympics, and then that's going to be the realistic end of my rowing. And I want to have something going on alongside or in the background, which means that when I stop, I'm not just floundering. I actually have a bit of a pathway set up for myself. So that was where I got talking to Jake and the guys at Podium Recruit, and sort of said, this is the study I've done. This is my interests. Find me a job, please. And they were like amazing, and that was really, really good. I think I talked to them on the Monday or Tuesday of one week, and the following week I had 4 interviews, awesome. Actually lined up and doing those interviews the following week. Did the interviews that week. Out of the 4, 3 of them were like happy to have me working in a part-time capacity while still doing my rowing, and I was very upfront with them in those interviews and said, look, rowing is my priority. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be going overseas. And the plus side of having done that through Jake and through Podium was that they'd already been like given that information, so they knew what they were signing up for, which was really nice for me because it meant that I wasn't having to go in and do a really hard sell, basically, of like, hey, employ me, but here's all these potential negatives. So yeah, started working part-time alongside the rowing. Probably about
actually awesome that you mentioned that, because Podium Recruit are part of our athlete friendly network, and it's really nice to have a I guess have that community set up around you so that some of those conversations can be preempted and can be supported in the background. So that's awesome that worked so well for you.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and that's one of those ones I definitely recommend to like all the athletes, even if you're not looking at a job, is to just sign up for it. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no obligation. I mean, I still get the emails coming through regularly from them of like, hey, these are the jobs that are available. This is like what's on the radar. And it's really cool. It's really cool to see. And it just, I wouldn't see any reason not to, because maybe you're not looking at a job, but then lots of the ones that pop up are, happy to work with athletes, Cambridge local for like the rowing and cycling and all those athletes. And some of them are like fully or like part-time remote or fully remote, so you would still be able to work while you're overseas and things like that if you wanted to. So
yeah, also a good opportunity to just see what's out there if you've got no idea what you're interested in.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm wondering, what was it like for you to work alongside rowing, like once that's kind of that was set up, I guess?
At first, a little bit chaotic, probably that first month, to be honest, because there's a classic case of starting something new. That was my first like proper foray into the professional world. I was working with people who are extremely good at what they do, and I was sort of like, oh wow, like why did they employ me? I feel like I've got no skills. All I've been doing is a athlete my whole life. But that's the sort of thing, is like I definitely didn't realize this while I was in sport and in rowing, is that people actually, and I always thought, I've got no transferable skills. How do I transfer rowing a boat into anything other than rowing a boat? Like maybe I can kayak or like whatever. So it was actually quite cool to get in there and see that like the transferable skills that you have from rowing and high performance sport into the professional world is like discipline, motivation, like that drive to succeed and do well. And that actually, and also the huge one was probably the ability to learn and the ability to take critical feedback. Because I remember one of the first things I had in my first few weeks was I sent out an email to our team and I was like, hey, basically it was just like a roast me, like tell me what I've done wrong, and just because I want to get better and I want to improve, so just go for it. And one of the ladies did send me a big email, so that was quite funny though. But yeah, probably that first month was a little bit like chaotic of figuring out, like I want to be showing my best foot at work, and obviously training is still the priority, and I've told them that. And then once I got through that first month, got to know the team, had a good understanding with them. They gave me they'd given me the flexibility from day one to say, we understand rowing is what you're doing and your priority, and work where you can, do what you can. If you need help, we're here to support you. And yeah,
it's awesome. I was just thinking, like, I remember us having this conversation about this feedback piece, right? Like, because athletes are so used to getting feedback, like daily feedback, even if it's just like the boat's slow today, like, immediately if something isn't quite going right. And then you've got obviously coaches and people around you to tell you, whereas that's not necessarily the same. And so actually what you did there is really awesome, to kind of go out and say, hey, can you give me feedback? So in terms of the transferable skills, I think that's definitely one that's often underestimated. Lots of athletes talk about that. The fact that they want to learn, and because they ask for that specific, direct, honest feedback, they just learn real quickly.
Yeah.
You also talked earlier in the conversation about having lots of kind of meetings with different people and having coffees and discussions with people in the industry and things. I just wondered, were there any kind of, I guess, communication skills that you picked up around like having been an athlete and navigating some of the interesting conversations that you might have that help you in this role now?
I would, honestly, especially in this job, it probably comes down to having straightforward and sometimes difficult conversations. But because as you're just saying with rowing is, like you're used to getting feedback, you're used to being told black and white, it's this or that. And I definitely say that that's helped in this role where often you're talking to people about, their finances and jobs and things like that, and can they afford this or can they not, and the house they might be looking at or investment properties it's probably made me less nervous about having those conversations with them and just been like, hey, this, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is the situation. This is where we're at. This is what you need to get to. And saying that, like when I first started in this role, I did find that a bit nerve-wracking or a bit difficult to do that. But people really appreciate the straight talking, I would say. Like they really appreciate that you have a straight up conversation and say, hey, this is what it is. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to waste other people's time and you don't want to waste your own time. So I definitely say that having straight conversations and coming from the background of yes or no, black and white, for the most part, has been quite helpful, actually.
Is there anything like about this transition that you wish you had known earlier, or that somebody had given you a heads up about?
Realistically, probably not. I'd say that, like yourself and the rest of the high performance sport team and the rowing team and community were extremely helpful and guided me really well. It definitely helped in terms of a stress side, obviously, having a job to go into before I stopped, because then when I was reaching that, because basically literally what happened is I was keen to keep rowing, and then one day I was out rowing the single and I was halfway up the lake and I was just like, you know what, I think I'm done. And that sort of just turned around and went in. And then the next day I was like, oh, that was weird, like whatever, that's never happened before. Went out the next day and I was like, you know what, actually one day I just didn't really want to do it anymore, which was it was really crazy. But having already doing the job in the background and having a bit of stuff there meant that it really took the stress away from, oh no, what am I going to do? Or it meant that I didn't keep trying for the sort of without the motivation there or for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. It was sort of like, I've realized I'm at the point where I'm done and that's it. But there is a pathway there. I've got a job happening in the background that I can just scale up to full time sort of within a week or two. So in terms of the transition, it was really good.
So like when you reached that decision, obviously like you were just talking about how you were out on the lake and were kind of like, this is maybe not me anymore. Like, can you talk us a little bit through the process of like, who do you discuss a decision like that with first, and then kind of how does that unfold?
First point of call was my wife. Got off the water, phoned her, and I was like, hey, had a weird morning. Or I think I called her and she said, that's weird, shouldn't you be training? Because it was like, and I was like, bit of a strange one. Sort of talked it over with her. And obviously it wasn't an instant decision. Like it wasn't did that one day and quit the next day. It was did that, had a few more rows, had a chat with some of the coaches, sort of said, hey, I'm going to take the rest of the week off. And they were like, yeah, no, that's fine. Like, see where you're at. Talked with a number of people. I talked with yourself, talked with Coach Gary at the time and Ferg, and talked with Judith, and through a range of those people. Also talked with some of my mates who I had rowed with previously who had stopped, and had that conversation. And then once I actually made the decision to, like, that is it, then it was a bit of a different conversation at that point with, again, like yourself, the coaches, Judith, but everyone was very supportive of like, what do you need? How can we help? what do the next steps look like for you, really helped already having a job, because then it wasn't the conversation of, oh, like, what are you actually going to do? It was like, oh, I've got something here. So, yeah.
It's really interesting too, like just, obviously you went to kind of your immediate support system initially, just like personal, and then like pulled in the wider support network, which is, what we obviously love seeing, people kind of going, okay, well, I might need some help with this, because it is a big decision. In some ways, it's quite cool that you got to make that decision as well. Like very powerful that it was your decision, not like an injury, career ending injury, for example, or that's kind of a nice way to.
It is really nice, and I understand I'm in a very lucky position to be able to mentally be in a place where it is my decision, and I don't feel like I've left anything behind, or there was something left in the tank, or I haven't had any questions of what if. And I've said this to a few people who have asked me, sort of, do you miss it? And I'm like, well, like, yeah, it's nice being able to be out on the lake each morning, but there hasn't been a single day where I've woken up and been like, man, was that the right move, or what if? It's been like, oh yeah, I'm happy with my choice, and I'm like happy doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, I don't know, like you'd miss little aspects of it, but maybe not the whole, the whole piece.
Yeah. I mean, trip to Europe each year would be nice, but again, that's the thing. I did that last year with wife and kids at home. It was actually like, being home would be nice. Yeah, like I think I'd rather be. And that was, I mean, to be fair, that was probably one of those factors that I didn't really think about at the time, but it was probably playing on the back of my mind a bit as well. As like, don't want to be leaving my wife and kids at home and missing them. So
yeah, the perspective does change a bit as well as you kind of mature as an athlete, I guess. You did mention earlier, and I just wonder if you've got a few more thoughts on that. You did mention that you obviously went to the Olympics and you kind of say, well, it wasn't quite what I wanted, but now you're kind of going, I'm really content with the decision and kind of what I've done there. Like how does that sort of marry up, I guess?
Well, obviously I would have liked to have had better results at the Olympics and be walking away with a medal or something like that. And still in my mind, I'm like, that would have been the ideal situation. But it's also a bit of a case of sort of being realistic with myself as well. And I think the reason I'm like sort of happy with it and able to look back now is because it was my choice to stop rowing. The option was still there to me to continue. I mean, obviously meeting selection and doing all of that, but the option was there for me. So sort of having that realistic and honest conversation with myself to say, actually, I think I'm done. I don't think I would have the mental energy to make it through to the next Olympics, means it's not a case of sort of, as you were saying, missing due to injury or missing due to missed selection or something like that. It's a case of me making that choice for myself and saying, I'm at a point where it's reached a natural end. And because of that, I can sort of look back and say, like, I wish there'd been better results. I wish maybe there's a few regrets along the way, but it's not it's not looking back unhappy. It's looking back and saying, I had a good run, went to 2 Olympics.
Not many people go to the Olympics. So it's interesting too, because like we've just basically, this whole conversation has been about what you've learned along the way and how you've applied it in the next phase of your life. So there's a whole bunch that you took with you and kind of skills and I guess the person you've become over that journey that you now have kind of readily available. Is there any advice that you would give to athletes who are currently training, who are kind of preparing potentially for a transition that might be closer or might be a few years away? Anything you'd say to them?
I'd probably touch on what I was saying before around sign up for the stuff at Podium Recruit. Look at some sort of part-time work, because I definitely found that, starting work initially, a little bit stressful, figuring out that balance. But that was also because, like kids at home as well. So there was like a lot of things to juggle, but overall it massively, massively took the stress out of rowing for me. Because suddenly, obviously I still wanted to perform, still wanted to do well, but there wasn't that back of my mind thing of, if I don't make selection, I'm going to be like out of a job effectively, and what am I going to do? It was like, oh, like there is another pathway there. This is what I'm doing at the moment, but there is like the not backup, because it's not sort of that sort of thing, but the next stage is already like set up and ready to go when I need it. So that took a lot of stress out. So I definitely say sign up for somewhere like Podium, make an account on Seek or whatever those sort of things are, and just even if you don't start working, just seeing what is there and what's in the game, like keeping your hand in the game basically, so that there is a bit of familiarity around it when you do look to go down that path.
Yeah. And I guess one of the other things you've talked a lot about is as well, just like chatting with those close to you, like who who are kind of either impacted because they are your spouse or your family, and then that sort of wider network be really helpful. Just keep everybody kind of in the loop so they can support you. Like have you got any other thoughts that you like, or things you wanted to say that you haven't quite been able to touch on before we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so. I think there's a pretty amazing. I mean, obviously, I've been involved in rowing, not other sports, so I don't have a perspective on all the other ones. But I think there's a pretty amazing support network in rowing and high performance sport through rowing, from like people like yourself and like the coaching team and the wider support network, and that like for athletes the entire time they are in sport, and then also like transitioning out of sport into the next steps. And like it's definitely a really welcoming place. Like I've popped down to like when Marty Cup was on and when trials were on, and pop into the building and say hi to people and like see what's going on, and bring the kids down still and have a look around. So it's a really nice place and a nice community to still be a part of, and have that ability to just walk in the door unannounced and say hi and see who everyone's doing. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. And like I hear you've been talking to a few, like keep talking to a few of the athletes that are still active and a few of the retired ones. So like it's nice to keep that connection going and those conversations. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. I think that wraps up like our episode really quite well. So thank you for being on Beyond the Boat.
My pleasure.
Thanks for your time. Thank you for chatting. And if any of our listeners or viewers, depending on how you're accessing this, have got any questions about what we've talked about, or you've got any ideas for other content that you'd like covered in any of these episodes, please email podcasts@rowingnz.kiwi. Thank you and have a good day.